Japan is going through its greatest political scandal of the century with over 500 million yen missing. This could easily topple the current administration as the Prime Minister's disapproval rate is at 87%, which is the highest it's been since 1947. Currently, the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office is investigating the ruling party for possible slush funds generated by fundraising parties, and this is the largest investigation since the 1990s. So what exactly is going on? Before getting into the detailed timeline of events, we need to first talk about these fundraising parties. Every political party has a method of generating revenue, and a common method is by hosting fundraising parties. In the Liberal Democratic Party, which is the ruling party, there are multiple factions of varying sizes, and they hold their own parties. Private individuals or companies purchase tickets to these parties, and that revenue is then used for political activities. Each ticket costs 20,000 yen, or roughly 150 USD. No one in their right mind would just attend a party uninvited. Politicians from each faction need to invite people or companies. In order to raise revenue, each politician is given a ticket sales quota, which varies by seniority. Whatever quota is met is given to the faction, but here's the interesting part. Whatever generated above the quota is usually given back to the politician who raised that money. So, for example, if a politician was expected to raise 2,000 USD but raised 3,000 USD instead, he or she may receive 1,000 USD back as pocket change. This part is legal. As long as the politician reports the kickback as income or identifies it as funds for political activity on his or her tax returns, there's no problem. The problem happens when this income is not reported. If such income is not reported, that's tax evasion, which is illegal. Consequences include imprisonment and fines, but most importantly, politicians would be stripped of their right to run in office for 5 years. This problem has been labeled as the uragane mondai or party-iken mondai. Uragane means secret money, and party-iken means party ticket, which refers to the fundraising activity. With that said, last year, the Japanese Communist Party wrote an article on their newspaper, the Akahata Shimbun, about the LDP's fundraising party's unreported revenue. Last month, a professor who apparently read this article and fact-checked the revenue filed a criminal case against the LDP for unreported revenue. The professor filed that 40 million yen went unreported for the past 5 years among the LDP factions. Out of all the factions, the Abe faction was said to have 20 million yen unreported. However, as investigation began, it is now believed that the Abe faction alone generated 500 million yen that was never reported. The Nikai faction is believed to have 100 million yen that was unreported. The Prime Minister's faction was also reported to have 2 to 3 million yen unreported. Anyway, as more information was revealed, the Prime Minister had to move fast. On December 7th, the Prime Minister announced that the LDP will not be holding any end-of-the-year and New Year's party for 2024. The following day, Kishida left his own faction. On December 12th, the opposition party filed a vote of no confidence against the Chief Cabinet Secretary, who is part of the Abe faction. On that same day, the government shared with media that they plan to replace all Abe faction members from the cabinet and the government, which includes ministers, deputy ministers, and parliamentary secretaries. This was later revised. All ministers and deputy ministers would resign, and the parliamentary secretaries would be allowed to remain. December 13th was crazy as Koichi Hagiuda, the ruling party's chairman of Policy Research Council, resigned. He, too, is part of the Abe faction. The main opposition party filed a vote of no confidence against the Prime Minister, which failed. Later that night, Kishida held a press conference to address the LDP's fundraising scandal. He claimed that he will be the fire pillar that leads the party, which was phrased as the ball of fire. Of course, critics were quick to respond that the LDP is literally a ball of fire. But most importantly, the current or I guess former Deputy Minister of Defense confessed that the Abe faction told him that there was no need to write the kickback amount. There was also revelation that Hosoda, the previous leader of the Abe faction, knew about the kickbacks. To further support the confession and revelation, on December 18th, it was reported that some of the unreported kickbacks were compiled on some documents. With such revelation, the prosecutors conducted a forced investigation into the Abe and Nikai faction offices. Such investigations hasn't happened in over 20 years. And that pretty much summarizes where we are right now. The parliament session ended on December 14th and will reopen in late January, so analysts are speculating that the prosecutors want to close the case within a month. Apparently, the prosecutor's office doesn't want their investigation to disrupt national politics. Therefore, it is most likely that the prosecutors will only take down politicians with a ridiculous amount of money rather than small amounts due to time constraint. There are at least 10 individuals who received 10 million yen, with 3 lawmakers receiving 40 to 50 million yen. There's been recent pushback within the LDP, especially the Abe faction, for not replacing the Nikai faction politicians on Kishida's cabinet. On December 20th, the Minister of Justice left the Nikai faction, but he will still serve as the minister. We still don't know how deep the Nikai faction is in this fundraising scandal, so we'll see what happens in the near future. Many things could happen in the next few weeks. Depending on the investigations, the Abe faction and perhaps the Nikai faction could disappear. This could easily anger politicians within these groups, which could hurt the Prime Minister because of the upcoming 2024 inter-party presidential election. One of the reasons why Kishida became Prime Minister is because the Abe faction supported his bid as president. There are also talks to dismantle all factions. While the LDP could make rules to discourage organized factions, it's probably near impossible to entirely get rid of factions as these are groups based on loyalty. The Prime Minister mentioned his idea to revise the law to regulate money used for political activities. If this were the case, this would need to be proposed when the Diet reopens in late January, which is still a month away. That's enough time to let more information to be revealed and let anger continue to boil. Kishida is out of ways to regain trust and popularity. He can't reshuffle his cabinet as he just did that in September. Kicking out Abe faction members wasn't enough as voters believe that the LDP as a whole is corrupt. He also cannot rely on regaining trust with policy proposals as his previous proposals to decrease taxes was met with backlash. The LDP also received a cold shoulder from his political ally, the Kome Party. The leader of the Kome Party publicly denounced the LDP on TikTok, saying he does not want his party to be seen as the same. For the first time in years, the ruling party and the main opposition party's approval ratings are only 2 to 3% different. On the flip side, 42% of the population are nonpartisan, which is also the highest in history. Everything is ripe for political change, but the opposition parties are weak and fragmented. Honestly, the LDP is fragmented as well. Kishida pretty much purged competition and there aren't competitive replacements that could gain popular support. Former giants of the LDP, including former Prime Minister Koizumi, shared how the LDP under Kishida's leadership will lose in the next elections. Therefore, I strongly believe we're entering a risky yet exciting stage in Japanese politics. The LDP may have a massive internal reform, and we may see a new leader. This could be for the better or worse because Kishida is seen as a moderate politician. Whoever replaces Kishida could easily be more conservative or more liberal. The main opposition party could try to form a political coalition with other parties in preparation for the next elections. Or the Japan Innovation Party, the second largest opposition party, could try to gain more popularity and become the main opposition or ruling party. I believe we're at a breaking point, and it only takes one popular figure to stand up against the current ruling party to take over the political scene. We're at a point where one famous YouTuber or influencer could probably win the next election if he or she joins a party with roughly 10% of the population's vote. Do you think the LDP will crumble, or will Kishida survive? Also, do you think the opposition party could replace the current ruling party? What would be the best case scenario? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video if you learned something new, and subscribe to learn more about Japanese politics.